So now I think with everything that's happening in the GEO space and the fact that we can help brands in this,
You're very uniquely placed. Like it's insane.
and I think it's sort of sometimes you just need to hang in there and wait for luck to happen, you know, and that's that sort of entrepreneurial part of, I guess, you know, luck being there, right? It's we're in there and we're building a product that solved a need for brands, and now there's this additional benefit that it drives, and that benefit is incredibly sexy, I guess, to VCs and whatnot.
Chris, welcome to the first podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
So to set the scene here, mate, maybe just give the viewers and listeners a bit of a background on what Linkby is.
Sure. So Linkby is a performance PR platform. So what that means is that we connect brands with publishers, newsletters, creators, anyone who's creating content really. And the brands can work with those partners on a cost per click basis. So if you're a brand, it means that you get a feature that could be a piece of written content, an article or listicle about your product. The benefits for brands are it drives new customers through their doors. You know, it drives them performance-based outcomes out of a channel that previously wasn't really measured in a performative way. It can also boost their GEO sort of rankings. So, you know, AI prompt-based search, you know, a lot of these articles are then being used as citations, which is huge for these brands. And brands are seeing those results in a matter of weeks. I think the best results are when brands, you know, do it as an always-on strategy, because that space is just evolving so quickly. And we operate in with Australia, the US, the UK, we're all over the place. So we've just raised our Series B, and you know it's all about growth at the moment. Yeah,
we're going to dig into all that, so it's going to be pretty exciting. But like the way we usually like to set the scene here is we really like to unpack like a founder's kind of early upbringing and see if there's any like signals of entrepreneurship. So maybe like taking a step back, like, you know, what was upbringing like for you? Do you grow up in Sydney? You know, what was family life like? You know, were there signs of wanting to build a company?
Yeah, I think I was always that like entrepreneurial kid. So I have lived most of my life in Sydney. You know, I think when I was maybe like 8 years old, I was very into the like like the sort of 90s NBA scene. So I'd get these basketball magazines, cut out, you know, all the like images of the players, and then
love that.
I would sort of stick them on shoe boxes. And then I went to school and this kid was like, oh, like that's sick. Like I'll buy it off you. And so rather than being like, oh no, that's this like thing that I spent hours on, I was like, yeah, sure. Like how much? Like, you know, so I think I sold it for like $30. And then, you know, I had all these little schemes. There was a friend whose mum worked at it's like a lolly factory, right?
Yeah.
And so she could get these bags of like, they're called killer pythons, but they're basically these long jelly snakes. And, you know, I think at the time they probably sold for like, maybe like 25 cents or 50 cents or something. I'm probably showing my age. They're probably like $8 now. But, and so you could buy these bags of kind of deformed ones, like ones that didn't pass the quality test, but, you know, still tasted good, for like $2 for like a 4 kilogram bag. And so I was like, oh, sweet, I'm going to buy these bags of these jelly snakes and then go to like the school down the road and sell them like after school. And that never really quite eventuated.
Never took off.
You know, we took bets on like the Melbourne Cup when we were like 15. Like we had like ran a book on the Melbourne Cup, you know, which is highly illegal and highly risky as well. Like there was one horse we were like, if this horse wins, we're screwed. Like, like everyone's betting on this one, but if any other horse wins, we're fine.
Yeah.
We did okay. It was one of the other horses won, so that was good. And then there's so many little things like that. Like
that is actually amazing.
I tried to buy and resell personalized number plates, like, you know, just really embarrassing. So
there's a few signs here, obviously.
There's a few signs. Yeah, exactly. I know when you were asking that question, I was like, I think this will be pretty straightforward. Yeah.
And what about university, mate? Like, so you did, I think, finance and marketing. Was there like ever the idea to go into a corporate career for you? Because it doesn't seem like it from the outside in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was frustrated when I was at university. I think things are changing, but maybe not fast enough in that I was like, I'm going to do a commerce degree. So surely I'll be taught how to build a business because that was really interesting to me. And I would look at, you know, even when I was like 18, I remember, you know, sort of reading about people that were doing interesting businesses. So like businesses in the music space or the fashion space. And I was always kind of attracted to this idea that you could build your own thing.
Yeah.
But then I'd sort of do this commerce degree that's meant to teach you all about business, but there wasn't one subject on how to actually build a business. It was always about like molding people to then just go and work in the corporate ladder. So that was quite frustrating. But I did love the marketing stuff. Like it was for me, like advertising, marketing, media, that publishing, like all those spaces, it's kind of where creativity and business collide.
Yeah.
You know, and being a kid who was really creative and also liked, you know, art and music and all, you know, culture, and then looking at, you know, business, that felt like a happy place for me and somewhere where I could, you know, I would sort of tell myself back in the day I could be world class at this. And I think I either wanted to have like a very aggressive rise in a career or like go and do my own thing. I think once I got into the workforce and started to find just some of the politics at play, you're like, do I want
this?
Do I want to do this? Yeah. Like when you get told like, oh, well, you're not going to get a promotion because somebody else started before you. Yeah. I was like, well, why should I even try then? Like if you're just in some line. So yeah.
I think I'm going to show my age now because I recall pedestrian, I think, walking around like Fortitude Valley when I was growing up in like the little boutique stores, etc. Like what was the aha moment for like really diving into that?
Yeah. So, so after my university degree, I did like a 3-month, well, no, it was like four months summer internship at Procter & Gamble. Then I did like 8 months at University of McCann, met a good friend, like, you know, at University of McCann, we were sort of workmates. Oscar, we sort of started talking about, wouldn't it be cool if we launched our own media venture? Like, you know, we were getting all these like magazines and, you know, new radio stations and TV shows that were launching, and, you know, they'd come in and present it. And we were like, oh, you know, it still doesn't feel like the world that we inhabit and the things that we like are being represented through media. You know, that was back when media was very mainstream and there wasn't niche channels like, you know, YouTube hadn't even launched at that point and things like that. So this idea of creating a media company that resonated with us and our interests was interesting. And, you know, at the same time, the cost of digital video had really dropped. So you could then take kind of content and create content sort of, you know, not dissimilar to the setup we have here that you can then show on TV and it looks fine. And so the cost went from, you know, 6 figures and like big editing suites to then, you can have Final Cut Pro on a Mac and you can buy a video camera for about $5,000 that can produce documentary quality footage. So we, you know, there was a whole lot of that going on at the time, and our initial idea was to do a TV show, but we didn't like the fact that there'd be decision makers that would basically say yes or no, and who would take a chance on basically like a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old. So we started to look at other ways to get video content out there. And again, remember that at this point, YouTube had not even launched. Like it was really hard to even stream video on the internet. So we heard of this real estate agency in Brisbane that was dropping DVDs into people's mailboxes to promote houses and properties. And we were like, I didn't realize, because, you know, that was back when people had DVD collections and they were like, you know, $30 a DVD. And I was like, I didn't know that you could get DVD production down that cheap. That's interesting. Like, I was like, what happens if you put like, rather than real estate promotional material, what happens if you put like a TV show on it? Like, that would be cool. Like, you know, and so we, you know, looked into the manufacturing costs and, you know, started to kind of work out back of the envelope sort of math around like, you know, doing this free advertising funded cool DVD that we could distribute similar to like Vice magazine and other kind of free street press that you probably saw around Fortitude Valley. And and that's kind of what we sort of did. So the first pedestrian product was a 60-minute DVD magazine, which meant it was like a TV show that ran on DVDs. We had advertising around the packaging. We also had these ad breaks through the product that were unskippable, which is actually quite cool, technology at the time that you could kind of do this. So it was just the two of us, and we kind of did everything. So we like researched the interviews, shot the interviews, like organized and produced, you know, and like found the talent. We did the design for like the cover. We like authored the DVDs ourselves, which was this whole like, you know, technology thing that you had to learn. We edited all the footage. We even like all those shops that you would have seen the DVD in Fortitude Valley, like we went to Brisbane and went into the shops and negotiated, like basically just said, is it okay if we drop the DVDs here? Can you sign this thing? And then for the first few issues, we even like hand delivered all the DVDs to the stores because it was cheaper than getting a courier company. Like when we got the quote from the courier company, we were like, we can't afford that. but we can just fly to Brisbane and just deliver them ourselves, and that would be cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's what we did do in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane.
How big did it eventually get? Because like this might be my nostalgia just kicking in here, but it felt pretty prolific at the time. Now looking back on it, like it got pretty big.
The early stage, or Pedestrian as a brand?
Pedestrian as a brand.
Pedestrian as a brand grew quite a bit. Like it wasn't probably the DVD magazine thing. I think it'd be like Netflix. Like there's that famous thing that goes around every now, like that Netflix has that billboard. Like we started with DVDs. I'm like, oh, so I started with DVDs. So it's. Yeah, like Pedestrian, it started with two of us. It was like two of us for the first 18 months. And then we were bootstrapped, so we never raised any outside funds. So it was just a real, got to be profitable, got to kind of make more money, then you can hire this.
Every dollar counts.
So, but by the time we finished and walked out the doors, after selling the business, it was like 2019 and we had 100 staff and, $20 million plus of revenue and, huge profitability off the back of that as well. Like the business was like this EBITDA machine at that stage. So it was, which is the lessons of being bootstrapped, right? Like it's like when you know that every dollar counts, you don't ever really lose that. Yeah. And so it just means that, you don't spend money unnecessarily. And that's great.
I do want to come back to that actually in the fundraising point, because one of your investors actually said how great capital allocation managers you are from the VC landscape. But just touching finally on Pedestrian, like that whole like exit process, right? Like what was the rationale for that? Was it just like, hey, we've kind of like done it justice now, or you saw like headwinds, or was there a motivation there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 10 years into the journey. Yeah. All of our sort of net worth was in this thing, right? This was before people talked about like secondaries and like like we were just like, well, you either have the business or you sell it. Yeah. And that's kind of the way to unlock the value. So we probably had, the business was doing decent profits at that point, but I could kind of see some like storm clouds on the horizon. There was things I didn't love about the business. Like we really rode the Facebook traffic wave and that was great. But I was also like, we're very dependent on a few other channels. Yeah. For the, a large amount of like the audience and the growth. And I was like, what happens if those channels dry up? Which invariably ended up happening. Yeah. Like, Facebook's not the best partner now for publishers, and also the demographics of Facebook have changed. I think also live stage wise, I never wanted to be the old guy going around telling people what young people are doing. Like Pedestrian was very focused on a sort of 18 to 29-year-old audience. And at that point, I think I was maybe 32 or something that. I just started to come, or maybe 30 actually, but like just started to age out of the demographic. And running a reasonably successful business, like your lifestyle starts to change a little bit and move out of that. So that and a number of reasons. And I think a lot of what Linkby has become and like what Linkby tries to solve for, which is like performance focused ways for brands and publishers to work together, was another thing that it felt like some of the, like I couldn't always put my hand on my heart and go, oh, we're going to sell, 300,000 cans of Coke off the back of this. Like, Coke probably doesn't care, but if I was selling it into a close friend or something who had a brand, I'd be like, I don't know, like I want to make sure this works for you. And that's where the kind of the Linkby model came from. It's like trying to find a way for publishers and brands to work together that was kind of a win-win for both of them. That helps publishers and makes them money, but also helps brands be able to work with these channels that they really want to, but on a performance basis. Yeah.
I mean, maybe like somewhat of a personal question, but like we speak to like second-time founders, right? And like from the outside in, that looks like a successful kind of exit in some ways. And some people would have just been like, you know what, that's it. Cool. I'll like buy a house, chill out for a while. But it looks as if you kind of move somewhat quickly. Does that like kind of tell something about the way you are or the way you're kind of engineered?
I think a little bit. I mean, if you go back to all the childhood questions.
Yeah, exactly.
I love building things and sort of entrepreneurialism just, it's kind of part of me. Yeah. So I don't think I would ever sort of sit back and not do something. But I think for that moment, it felt like I, had done the Pedestrian thing, and it often got lumped in with technology businesses because it was a digital business, but largely it was a very traditional business model. It was, taking that digital publishing taking a publishing model and then just putting it into a digital space. And so I remember in I think it was 2015, just after we did the first tranche of the sale, going in and having lunch at the Canva offices with Mel from Canva. And so they were not massive at that time. I think there might have been 40 people and about 140 mil valuation or something like that. And I just remembered talking to her and looking at the dashboards up on the screen and just the vision. And there's this sort of the fact that you could run this incredibly global business out of Sydney just kind of blew my mind. And I was like, I really if you are a fan of entrepreneurialism and you're not in sort of scalable technology, then you're sort of playing in the wrong space. Yeah. And so I kind of knew, okay, I want to test myself again and go again. And if I can do something on a global scale, then that'll be, I'll learn a whole lot of new things. Even going down maybe a VC path, that was something I hadn't done before. So it was just all these learnings that I hadn't had and experiences that I hadn't had. And there was also, I think part of me that just wanted to kind of prove to myself that it wasn't just a fluke and, that I could back up and do it again. I like to think that I'm I think there's some luck that goes into, kind of levels of success. But I think, being someone who can continually do something at a decent scale, showcases something. So I don't know who I'm trying to prove it to, but yeah.
The interesting thing here, mate, is we talk a lot in VC and also tech about founder market fit, or what does this person know that maybe others don't. I mean, that seems pretty obvious in this sort of, example, right? Because you had Pedestrian, now you've got Linkby. I mean, did you need further validation with others? I don't know whether it was investors at the early stage, friends, family, etc., before you kind of dived into it and made that big leap into something that was maybe more tech?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particular. I've never been one to sort of really have build a financial model for an idea before testing it. I'm just kind of I've got a pretty good sense of numbers. I can sort of see how this would work. I can sort of know the type of figures we need to get to, and this seems to all kind of make sense on paper. And as you said, it was very much in a space that I knew and understood. So what I started working with my co-founder and CTO in Linkby, Andrew, we started sort of building an MVP product. So we sort of formally say that Linkby launched in 2020, but through to 2019, basically, even towards the tail end of the Pedestrian journey, I was sort of working on this MVP. And then we did do some early tests with some very early sort of D2C brands and connecting them with publishers on this early version of the MVP. It didn't do any automated invoicing or anything like that. It just sort of looked and felt like what the product would feel like. And we had, I think, Tim Doyle from Eucalyptus used it, connected them to some of the publishing contacts and network that I sort of had and onboarded them on this, the platform. So we could kind of test the early signs and what people wanted.
What was working,
you get that user feedback really quickly. And and it made sense to brands. Brands were like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Yeah, let's do it. And so that's positive. I think if you're going in and selling something and then people get it and you're getting a high kind of conversion rate, that's a positive sign. Publishers were like, yeah, cool. I understand this, you know? And so it just felt like that's probably the biggest validation, I think, more than sort of financial models or investors telling me something works. It's if customers on both sides of a marketplace or if customers are telling you that there's things there. And I think that's I hate this sort of I'm building in stealth. It's just, I mean, it's been covered for a bit, but just go tell people what you're doing because that's the best insights you'll get. And, if you're open to the feedback and open to and really listen to what people are saying, customers who, then they'll, that's the best way to start building. The weird thing that customers actually do is they'll go, does it do so it does this? And they'll explain the product back to you. And sometimes it won't be what your product does, but what they're actually explaining is the problem that they need solved.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they wanted to solve the problem that they have. And so if you really listen to that, you go, I can see where, and if everyone says the same thing back to you, you know where the challenge is in the market. So yeah.
I was going to call out the whole 2020 thing, right? Because I was snooping through your LinkedIn. It's Linkby official February 2020. Yeah. Which obviously the world had a lot of things going on then.
That is the official, that is when we went out and we were people are like, this is full time, this is happening, the website's out there, we're presenting this to people who aren't sort of friends and family or in the network. So
given everything that was going on then, is it safe to say that there was tailwinds to a business model like Linkby in a COVID era?
There was tailwinds in launching a global business from Sydney
Yeah.
during the COVID era.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we were really fortunate to have, because a lot of Aussie businesses do tend to sometimes struggle when they go to the US and they go to the UK.
Yeah.
But I don't think we struggled at all, because like all of a sudden we could just do video calls with everyone. And it's like people in New York were doing video calls with people a block away
then.
because you had to do that.
Yeah.
So it all of a sudden wasn't a drawback that we weren't there in the room or at the networking events. We could just present like anyone else. You know, we had to wake up a bit earlier or stay up a bit later, but so I think that probably helped us, just the kind of actual go-to-market motion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there wasn't, and I suppose like D2C did well during that period.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So the fact that, you know, probably there was like well-funded D2C brands that were growing and seeing sales go up might have helped a little bit. But, you know, but that said, I mean, the revenue is significantly higher now. So, you know, it just, but yeah, definitely not having to be in the same room. Having that benefits of being able to just sort of present over video, not being at a disadvantage from someone who's there and can meet them for coffee.
Yeah. But I mean, we're talking 5 years ago now, right? Like, was there like an educational component to working with those early customers? Because it's like, you know, maybe kind of set the scene here before 2020, like there was a lot of archaic methods, I guess you could say, within the advertising industry and that model. Was it like sort of you had to get certain clients up the curve on like what Linkby was and what Linkby could be?
For clients, it actually, I think, makes a lot of sense, because we just sort of say, think about PR and this is the expectation of what you're going to get is very similar to a PR outcome.
Yeah.
Except you'll be able to measure it and you have more control over it. And it's significantly more effective because there is a win-win relationship.
Yeah.
So I think because brands are used to that, when they come to Linkby and they go, oh, it's performance PR, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can do that. So for brands, it's quite easy to sell into. For publishers in the US were probably a bit further along this sort of path. And so a lot of them had shopping teams. They worked heavily with affiliates. And so, you know, on a cost CPA model. So going in and explaining CPC to them, there was a little bit of education at times, because when they start to see the numbers, like if anyone actually crunches the numbers, they go, this is definitely better for us.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's what most publishers see now. And so, you know, we sort of are probably the most effective way to get coverage for a consumer brand, like anywhere in, you know, in the US or the UK or Australia, anywhere that we operate.
Yeah. I mean, what was hard then in that first 12 months? Like what was really like keeping you up at night? Like if there was reception from like the brands and the publishers that made a lot of sense, you could scale internationally pretty seamlessly by the sounds of it. Like what was actually the most difficult trait, do you think?
I think probably the most difficult thing was just the fact that we were bootstrapping at that stage.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to take an idea out that actually didn't have legs, and sort of take a bunch of VC money and then have to like go, oh, I'm going to have to just slog this out for 3 or 4 years with an idea that's like actually just not going to go anywhere. I was just like, oh, you know, let's give this thing a go. If it doesn't work, fine. But, you know, we gave it a crack, and we can also test it and whatnot. I also wanted to kind of, you know, I think at that stage, you know, this was sort of 2020, so valuations were pretty frothy. It sort of felt like, oh, you know, I've had a successful exit, so I can put some money into the business without, you know, any kind of major financial strain. And if I can build some real proof points, like if I can say, oh, we're not just in Australia, but we're in the US, we're in the UK, we've got like, say, at least $1 million of revenue flowing through the platform. Those are the type of milestones that, you know, will prove to an investor that, okay, maybe we'll be able to kind of raise a more like blockbuster style seed rounds, you know, and I'll have to give away less equity. And that's kind of how it sort of played out. Like, I mean, you know, this seed round was at a, you know, really healthy valuation. We got great investors on board, but we didn't have to give away as much equity as, you know, we would have if we raised probably you know, like at an idea stage. So that sort of, you know, I don't know, like maybe like $1 million or something that I put into the business, you know, from the exit, had probably a 10x
outcome,
you know,
based off
outcome,
that.
you know, if not higher, like maybe even 20x outcome.
But what was, I do want to touch on fundraising, but like, before you went to that kind of first seed raise, like what did the product actually look like? And I do want to touch on like product market fit here, because we always speak to founders about product market fit. Like, is it a real thing? Is it a mirage? Does just product market fit just change every week and month? Just keen to get your take on that in those early days.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, to me, product market fit is like, again, similar to what we touched on before. It's going to customers, and the customers get it and they want it, and you just should know that. Like you know, if you're constantly, if meetings aren't going anywhere, if no one's signing up for the product, is this a business that you really want to be raising behind?
Yeah.
And also, are you listening to the feedback that's coming back from people? Because people will tell you what they want.
Totally,
And if you're not taking that on board and tweaking things or pivoting or whatnot, then you're missing an opportunity. Like, I think, Linkby, the idea and now what it looks like, it's very similar. Like I think it was sort of built off of probably like 15 years of like knowledge of that industry. So therefore I think we could be a bit more confident, but there's still things that have played out where I'm like, oh, that's, interesting. That's not where I thought things would go, but sure. Like, we'll go there. So whereas like, Pedestrian had a really hard pivot, right? We went from like DVD magazines to, launching a kind of online news website, and that ended up then becoming the thing that kind of pushed the business forward. Like we were very, just like, no, it's a DVD magazine business and that's all this thing is ever going to be. Like we obviously would not have a business now.
Totally.
So, yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this a bit offline as well, but just to kind of like finish off on the product topic is, obviously the product is pretty similar, like still, but there's a lot of things happening in the AI space. And you referenced at the start, right, the whole GEO and indexing piece. Like, what does that mean for your business model, and how have you guys reacted to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you talked about tailwinds at the start. Like, I think probably until the GEO, so generative, engine optimization, or AI,
there's a whole bunch of
AEO,
or like
whatever acronym you want to use, right? But essentially, it's just, you type something into ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude, and then, an answer appears.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people now are typing shopping-based things or intent-based, prompts into these platforms, and, how do you know that your brand's going to appear there? Or what can you do to help your brand appear there? And so there's a lot of basic things. Like, I think if you've been doing the fundamentals of SEO and you're all over that, and you have lots of owned and operated content on your site, then look, you're well ahead of most brands. But the space that we really help is kind of on that external citations. So, especially for consumer brands. So, we worked with a brand recently, Elta MD, bit large sunscreen brand in the US. They dropped like, we created like 40 articles for them in a week. A couple of weeks later, you type in like best sunscreen, like if you're in the US, you type in best sunscreen, Elta MD comes up, number one citation. It's an article that Linkby created for them. Or there's a teeth whitening kit product in the UK, and you type in best teeth whitening at home teeth whitening kit in the UK. They come up number one. There's like 15 citations. I think 60% of them are like Linkby stories. So it's proving to be really effective at getting brands that sort of level of coverage. And I think it's probably the first time that we've had a tailwind, because I think, when Pedestrian started, we had a tailwind because, young people and news is moving online. So, that was great. But then obviously the publishing industry as a whole doesn't really have many, tailwinds to speak of probably at the moment. And even to some degree, trying to be an advertising platform outside of Meta and Google is always going to be to some degree a battle.
Yeah.
And advertising tech, marketing tech has never been a particularly sexy area for VCs to invest in, especially kind of in the current, sort of last 5 years. So I think in the 5 years that we've had Linkby, it always felt like, well, we have an unfair advantage in this space, and we have knowledge in this space that is probably second to none.
Yeah.
So this probably should be the space we build in.
Yeah.
But VCs, this is not the space. It's also, we're not a SaaS product. We're not enterprise. We're we're a take rate model. It's a marketplace. So there's a lot of things not to like if you're an investor, from the traditional view. But, therefore we just had to prove it out with revenue and kind of actual business traction and, product market fit, if that is a thing. And so that's kind of, how we sort of proved it out. So now I think with with everything that's happening in the GEO space and the fact that we can help brands in this,
you're very uniquely placed. Like it's insane. Yeah.
And I think it's sort of, sometimes you just need to hang in there and wait for luck to happen, and that's that sort of entrepreneurial part of, I guess, luck being there, right? It's, we're in there and we're building a product that solved a need for brands, and now there's this additional benefit that it drives. And that benefit is incredibly sexy, I guess, to VCs and whatnot, like where it's, it's in sort of, it's almost like selling shovels during a gold rush. So,
I do want to shift to people and culture here. It's funny, like we first met like only months after I sort of joined VC, and I remember seeing you in Sydney, and you seem like such a warm, like good to be around person. And you like kind of invest in founders sometimes, and you're like, man, this person would be a great leader. Like it'd be great to work for. And you come across as one of those.
Oh, thanks.
And I just want to like ask, like, culture, right? Like, did you keep the same approach as like culture with Pedestrian as you do with Linkby? Do you have certain principles on how you think about culture?
I think it's a bit of an evolution, and there's definitely things I've learned along the way. I think when I was in the early days of Pedestrian, like I found it really hard to not sort of input onto everything. And, so maybe at times it's not quite micromanaging, but like I definitely probably wasn't as respectful of like lines of communication, kind of when building an organization. And I think that part of that was just because I thought I was being helpful, because I was like, it would go and say to an editor, I was like, oh, maybe you should just work on this. And I was like, oh, like, wouldn't that be cool? Like Chris, the founder's like chatting to you. But the thing I didn't realize was that like, that's terrifying. Like no matter how nice and warm you are, and no matter how nicely you say that, if you're like a skip level manager, like, or even more so, they're like, why is this person talking to me? Like, what have I done wrong? Right? It's like going through their head. And I think also, so the way we probably like approach culture at Linkby, or the way I like to do it is, I've got a management team that I trust insanely. Like, every single person's fantastic. I would just back them 100%. And so I can kind of sit there and go, well, they've got all those parts of the business locked down, under control. So I can actually just support and coach kind of where needed. And I think in terms of the culture, the big difference is that Linkby we're quite like remote friendly, I suppose might be a better way to do it. So, we only have one fixed office, which is in New York. And even that sort of came about organically. Because I think there was a bit of demand for people to have a space to go into. I guess New York apartments are smaller, and people want to be able to kind of get out of away from their housemates and things like that into an environment where they can get some work done. So we've got that office there, but every other sort of hub that we've built has maybe like 1 to 2 co-working days a week, but even those are kind of quite optional. So there's a big focus on flexibility, trust, like, trusting that you get good people in, and, that they want to perform, and so you can trust them to work from home. And,
has that been hard out of curiosity? Because like I looked at, I think it was a video you guys posted the other day, maybe posted Series B, and it showed like different staff in different parts of the world. It was really cool. And obviously it looks as if you guys have leaned into that whole remote, flexible first global workforce. Was that tricky to like set up? Has it got trickier as like the companies sort of evolved and got bigger?
No, because I think like I remember even before COVID happened, I read the Basecamp founders book, which like if anyone's interested in different ways to approach work and remote culture and all of that, this was before COVID hit. It was like really mind blowing. And like that was very like influential, because I was like, oh, like, I think the name of the book's like, it doesn't have to be crazy at work. And so their approach to building a company, their approach to the way that they manage teams and find the best person for their job, a lot of that I think came from, their thinking around it. And, they built this incredibly successful SaaS company with like 50 staff or 100 staff. Like it was almost the original probably ARR per employee type of company, And so I was really interested in that model. And then obviously COVID happened, which kind of accelerated it. But because I think I was interested in that model, we were, and the timing of COVID, it meant like nothing got broken.
Yeah.
We were always designed for remote work from home first. And so
I think change.
I think the challenge is when companies had all these processes and they were used to people working in the room, and all of a sudden now it feels like it's the lesser of the, because it feels like they've lost something, like there's a part of them missing. Whereas for us, it's like that everything's been designed for that. So, I think we've been reasonably fortunate. And I think that's another way for people to think, is that, if you design for that first, then you don't actually, it can scale and you don't miss out on things.
Yeah.
And you can always dial up the, like now when we kind of come together, I see it more as like, that's the culture building part where it's like, okay, that's when I go into the co-working space, it's more about the chats that I can have with people and the rapport that I can build and listening and on conversations and things like that, which, previously would do in an office setting day in, day out.
Yeah.
But, I just think that you can be so much more efficient, and it's different for different people's, how the people work and whatnot. But yeah, for me personally, it's, if you take a commute out of the day, that's like an extra like hour and a half that you have. So, yeah.
One question we always ask is like traits of hiring, like even, and it may change, right? Like early, like maybe pre-seed to now, like post Series B. Like what traits did you look for in those early hires? Like what is, people talk about grit and all these other kind of traits, but like what kind of works for Linkby?
Yeah, I think, I'm always looking for someone who brings something new to the business that we didn't have. So, it might be like a skill set or a like knowledge in a certain area. That's what really excites me. Or you see someone who's like using AI in their kind of workflow in a really interesting way. Like, we just hired a UX designer who, he came in and he was like, I'm like a no code UX front end guy. Like, and he was showing us how he like, it was the most incredible use of Lovable I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like
I was going to say that.
Me typing stuff into Lovable is like, build this website for me. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. And so it's just like this like series of failed projects. Whereas this guy was just like, with a bit of technical knowledge and the way he was using it, I was like, that's incredible. Like what you can do in, like, it was like seeing the AI future like right in front of you and seeing the power of some of these tools when harnessed by someone who actually really knows how to use them. So that was incredibly exciting. Or, so yes, we hire for that. I think in terms of how we test things like grit and, I suppose things like that, it's like, say, a salesperson. I don't really care about logos. I'm actually more excited when I get someone who's like sold something really hard. Like if you've sold door-to-door phone systems, to businesses or something like that.
Or killer pythons.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like, that's a hard thing to sell. So if you've done that successfully and you've been at that company for a few years, chances are you'll be able to sell this, which is relatively easy.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of things. It's actually probably the one part of the job that I find the most exciting and interesting is like building teams and pulling them together. So yeah.
I mean, one of the questions I have is, we spend a lot of time with founders at the moment, especially ideating around the pull to go international.
Yeah.
And so obviously a lot of Aussie founders like go to the US. Like I feel like that is actually getting earlier and earlier. Like there's more going at that kind of pre-seed seed, and they might go to YC. They may look at like early US investment. Like what would be some advice that you'd give to founders like that are kind of considering making that leap? Is it like, is it the pull of the customer? Is it the pull of the investor? And obviously like no business is the same, obviously, but you guys like, from the sounds of it, like have done a pretty solid job at doing that and doing that effectively and doing it dispersed and remote and flexible. What advice would you give to founders?
I think you need to first of all start with your business and look at like, how big is the market in Australia? Like, can I build a large, company that could probably get to profitability in the Australian market, right? Yeah. So if you're trying to take on like, I don't know, if you're a health tech business or something like that, and you go, okay, like can we win in Australia first or win in, whatever market you're in? And, what does that business look like if it's at scale? Then I think you probably are better focusing maybe locally till you get to a certain level. And, and then maybe once you raise you prove out the fact that you can run a successful business in this market, then you go raise larger rounds, use that money to take the model and the technology that you've built to go into like the US or the UK. Because also like the further along your tech is, like the easier it is when you launch into a new market. with Linkby, like I always knew we'd have to go to the US to really kind of make the business hum, because we're very much based on the scale of publishers, the marketing budgets of brands, and all of those things are bigger
Proximity
in the US.
over there,
And also I knew that the technology didn't actually, like, we don't need to do much to launch into a new market. Like, you know, if it's an English speaking market and we don't need to translate the product, like it takes the development team like 24 hours. So I think that's another thing to look into, is like how much regulation is there in an industry? How many, you know, different platforms do you need to kind of integrate with? Because if there's a lot, and there's quite a lot of technical, you know, work that needs to go into, or like understanding a different system, or you know, some sort of bureaucracy, or those type of things, then I wouldn't be going to the US and a whole different market too early, because you're just going to end up with a whole lot of technical debt, and you're going to end up with two middling products. You know, whereas what you kind of need is, you know, one product that's really humming, and then you can start adding, you know, kind of, and we're talking about kind of geos as products, but that's kind of essentially what they are in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know we've touched on it a bit across the course of this conversation, but fundraising, right? We got connected, I believe, through one of your investors, and they were like, you know, they're incredible in terms of, like I said before, financial allocation, just being super frugal, but right with how they choose to spend. But obviously you bootstrap Pedestrian, right?
Yeah.
What was that kind of first process of fundraising like for Linkby? Did you have like a process? Did you know what you were doing at all?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess like we'd gone through a sale process for Pedestrian. So there are quite a few similarities between a sale process and raising an investment round. Like, you know, you sort of you meet with investors, you explain about the business, you tell the story, you showcase the financials, you try to get them kind of like along that journey. I think I thought that it would be easier than it was. Like, you know, so you know, I was just like, well, you know, like I've had a successful exit, I've built a business, I'm building a tech business now, so checkmate, right? Surely like that people will be lining up to sign checks for me. But I think the fact that we weren't building in a, you know, maybe if I went in and said, yeah, we're building like, it's like fintech for healthcare, AI,
tick,
you know, like SaaS business, and you know, we've already got $1 million of ARR. Like then I'm sure like checkbooks would have all come out. But because it was a space that people didn't know, they didn't understand, they had preconceptions about it, they, you know, like a lot of the thinking was trapped in what adtech looked like 15 years ago, or like, you know, and people have their biases, and you really sort of see that. And I think also that as a result, we weren't as prepared as we should be. Like it's just sort of the decision to kind of raise, and the process was a bit messy. It was very messy for the seed round, but like, you know, we got fantastic investors, and, you know, we had interest, and you know, but I think it was kind of in spite of ourselves a little bit. And then I thought the Series A, because like we then went away and we performed really well and our numbers were incredible. I was like, okay, this is going to be easy, right? Because like, you know, we got all that, you know, the exit of founder, this, that, but then we also have great numbers. This is going to be easy. So again, I don't think we were as well prepared as we should be. And it wasn't easy. It was like, just again, a bit of a slog. It was hard. You know, we couldn't get outside of the fact that the people just didn't like the space that we were kind of, you know, working within. So anyway, so then for the Series B, we really locked in. We're like, this is going to be so hard. Like, you know, the numbers were great, but we were like, this is going to be really hard. And it actually turned out to be really easy because we were so well prepared for it. So yeah, that is, so look, I think in terms of like lessons to people, I would say like, be prepared, like know, you know, you need to run it like a process, right? So in a sale process for a business, there's a lot of creating time pressure, you know, and so making, and I think what I see with a lot of like early stage founders, it feels like they're just always fundraising. They're always doing meetings, they're always meeting with investors. But really the best way to raise funds is like, you narrow it to like 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe of like meetings, and you just
go for it.
Hammer the meetings, and you like line people up also in a concerted order. So, you know, we've always lined up the international investors first and then go talk to the Australian investors because we're probably more likely to raise from an Australian investor. We're here, we're on the ground. So, you know, if we're talking to the internationals first, then it gives us more time if we need to, you know, fly over there, or if we need to do follow-ups. It also, you know, can help to lead the Australian market a bit. I think, you know, local smaller markets have a bit of FOMO if there's overseas interest.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How do you, I mean, you've got some great investors on your cap table. Like, how do you best utilize those investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about, first of all, it's probably knowing that an investor, like you don't really, I want to say you don't owe them anything, because obviously you do owe them a lot.
Yeah.
But like, I think one trap that I see is that like people, you get this sort of master servant relationship happening a little bit sometimes, where you go, oh my God, like getting back to my investor is the most important thing that I can possibly do. Maybe during a fundraise process it is, but I think afterwards you need to balance the fact that, you know, that they want to see you win. So like they don't want you, they shouldn't be taking up your time that you could be out there spending selling your product. So I think it's always fine to sort of go, I'll get back to you on those questions, but is it okay because I'm slammed with this new business meeting, this like, you know, potential strategic partnership in this? The investor will almost always say, of course, right?
Yeah.
And I think for people that maybe have never had that sort of relationship of someone having an ownership stake, there's this feeling that you have to like, that your job now is to make your investors happy.
Yeah.
But it's like the best way to make an investor happy is just to make the business go well. And if the financials are good, the investors actually don't really want to talk to you. They just want to like, cheer you on, and you know, it makes them look good. Like, so that is one thing I would probably just say in terms of like managing investors. But in terms of getting the most out of them, it's just, you know, it's just the ask, right? It's like when you need help, if you think that one of your investors can help you with that, then, you know, use them and use their network, because they are really networked, right? So, you know, when we were hiring a CFO, like we reached out to OIF and we were like, hey, like we're trying to hire a CFO. Is there anyone in your network? And, you know, like we had like David Shane, like the, you know, one of the top guys, like, you know, sending us like CVs for people. And like, you know, we ended up for hiring our CFO through someone through his network and personal recommendation. And he's been great. And, you know, is a key part of the business. And that was awesome. It was super helpful. Or like, you know, Volition, or it has already been, you know, added a lot of value in just sort of connecting us with other people within their stable. Like they have a lot of like data and across their sort of portfolio company of like tech stacks that they use and things like that. So yeah, but it's sort of using them when you need them, but also not feeling like you're you know, you're sort of indebted to them, like in the literal sense, but like, you know, that they just want to see the business do well. So make sure that you like understand that and don't get hung up with like pleasing investors when you should actually be just
focusing on
building a great product and making sales and making money.
As we look to kind of wrap up here, I do want to talk about future state. I know we've spoken about GEO, etc.
Yeah.
But you know, what does like Linkby look like in 5 years' time, right? Like, is there further global expansion, people expansion, capital requirements, all that kind of fun stuff that you guys are currently considering?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that we want to turn the platform from kind of what it is, but into a giant kind of recommendation engine for performance PR. So at the moment, brands come into the platform, they choose their partners, they set their budget, they set their CPC, and then they set up a campaign. But we know that as we scale the amount of partners and creators and channels, you know, currently there's like hundreds of channels that they can choose from, which is still, you know, there's not so much that they can't go in and choose the categories and whatnot. But at a certain point, if we have 30,000 channels, which we very easily could, it becomes almost impossible for a person to be able to properly work out the best channels for them. And so at scale, the platform really needs to do that, and we'll have the data to be able to do that. So we're working on that at the moment. So it's kind of, it's a large sort of machine learning model. There'll probably be some AI over the top of it. I think that will be a game changer for the business, both in terms of helping brands get the best possible outcomes, helping them discover new channels, and also helping them really optimize for return on investment, because we'll be able to set sort of dynamic CPCs depending on the category and the types of people that they're working with, and you know what's likely to drive conversions and whatnot. So yeah, like we've driven, you know, tens of millions of clicks across the platform. We've created like tens of thousands of pieces of, you know, content. There's this huge scale there now that we can really tap into and, you know, kind of pull in all of that intelligence. And so that's what we're kind of doing at the moment. So that to me, so the future state is basically, you know, every brand in the world, when they have news that they want to get out there, they just go, well, why wouldn't I use Linkby to get this news out there? Because it's like the fastest, most efficient, most guaranteed way of getting coverage. And if we can unlock that, then the win for publishers is huge, right? Because it means that you're unlocking this massive need, and those dollars, instead of flowing into just a Facebook ad or a kind of, Google ad, they're starting to flow back into, kind of that ecosystem. So that's I think what we sort of see probably like when we look at it at a future state is this, and it's just sort of a key part of the marketing stack for like all sort of consumer brands and even probably B2B brands as well.
Somewhat personal question. If we think about pedestrian as like somewhat shaping youth culture, right? And Linkby shaping, I guess, global advertising and ad tech, basically. It's somewhat like you're leaving a bit of a legacy in some ways. Like, is that how you see it? And I know that like the answer could sound arrogant. I know, but I don't want to like lead you into that. But it's like what is the legacy you want to leave here in some ways? Because it looks like you're having great traction and great momentum from the outside looking in, but just keen to unpack that.
I mean, like, I suppose it is sort of, I do kind of look at my career as like, oh, it's a career that's really, it's now 2 decades spent in this space, which I do kind of enjoy. Like, it is interesting seeing the mark you can leave on it. I think maybe that it's more of a like chip on your shoulder thing where I'm like, I sometimes think back to, like I loved my marketing courses at university, but like I never got good marks in them. And I would leave exams and I crushed that. And I'd have these huge essays and like they'd go for like, they'd be just talking about all these things and topics and like, ideas. And then I'd leave and be like, I think I failed that exam. If you look at like the marks I got and the fact that what I ended up getting, I was like, how did that happen? Like I was like, they're just not getting it. Or even like, Procter and Gamble, like almost every other grad that like did the like summer internship got offered a full-time job. I did not. So I don't know. I think there's like an element where I'm like, no, like I'm, thinking back to the kid that had to sort of, convince his parents that like marketing was a good thing to do. And I think I remember telling them like, I think I can be world-class at this. So, like, I guess there's an element of maybe just sort of trying to respond to that. Yeah, the chip on my shoulder, as opposed to me sitting there going like, what a legacy I've built.
Yeah, I've nailed it. Yeah.
Like, I think I'm still sort of trying to like, I'm just waiting for my guest lecture spot at UNSW. It's like,
any day now,
like I found out that like a friend of mine, like who's in like commercial real estate, got asked back to like UTS, like
Australia, mate. That's
to do a guest lecture. I'm like, you know what? Like I'm still waiting for my call. So anyway, if you're out there,
Final question, mate. Like, if there's any war stories, learnings, or words of advice that you could impart on founders, what would they be?
Oh, I mean, you just need to keep going. Like, like founding can be really tough, especially in that, like the first business, like the grind that we had to go through at Pedestrian was just, it was pretty incredible in those early days. Like some of the, the hours we had to put in and this and that. And it's not, I think now it's sort of, it's not about glorifying hustle culture. It's about kind of knowing why you want to do this thing and realizing that like sometimes you need to just push yourself and, go for it. And especially if you've got time is like the biggest asset that you kind of have on your hands. And like, if you're trying to disrupt a huge industry or you're trying to bootstrap because like all, VCs have ignored you, like just keep going because like, keep going and listen to people. Like don't keep going with your head in the sand going, this is the right way to do things. Like people will be giving you feedback, listen to what people are saying. And, know what to filter out, but also be open to something that keeps coming up because, there might be a pivot right there. There might be a new opportunity and, the business as you see it might not exactly be what the business will look like. But yeah, sort of it's entrepreneurship's given me so much. I think it's an amazing journey and it's fun to kind of get out there and, put something into the world that has never existed. I think that's kind of wild when you think about it. So
awesome.
And be kind to people. Like, just be one of those people that like is good and easy to work with and doesn't have a huge ego. And, because like that's actually what people will remember about you. And so if that's an employee that's then going to come back to your second startup and work with you again, or it's an investor that might, kind of have passed on you the first time, that then will end up backing you at a later round. Like, we met the Series A investors at the, seed stage and we were too small for them then. and then they came back and they
It all
invested
comes
in
around,
us.
yeah.
So, just, you want to be the person that people want to work with and,
Yeah.
and want to be, just make the world a better place, for the people around you.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for joining us on the first.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for having me.